Well, good evening, everyone. It's so good to be here. You know, the Eastern Cape is so close to my heart. I married, obviously, a Hart, and they're from Kulcha. And I used to live in Port Elizabeth. That's where I met Neil. His parents, his mom passed away recently, my mom-in-law, but his dad and his brothers still live on the farm. And so I regularly come to the Eastern Cape, and a few of you that I've chatted to already, I spoke about Hogga Hogga, which is where we go every year. We have a family cottage there. And so Hogga is, I think it's a little piece of heaven. So how many of you have been to Hogga Hogga? Okay, so you know where I'm talking about. Our house is next to the library. If any of you are there over December, come and say hi. But as Graham mentioned, I'm a mom to two young adults. My son Matthew is 25. He just turned 25 2 weeks ago. And Emily is 23. I got married in 1998. So I've been married for quite a while. And I think marriage actually gets better and better as the years go on. I've enjoyed every stage of parenting my children and raising them. And I remember when they were young, I think my hardest part actually was when they were babies because I didn't understand the cries. But then every stage got better and better. And I remember thinking, wow, can it get any better? And now that my children are adults, it's even better. And I remember thinking, Lord, I don't receive the temper tantrum stage. I don't believe that teenagers have to rebel and you have to have this horrible time. Honestly, the teenage years with my children was wonderful. It was tricky, but it was wonderful. And so I want to encourage you with that because I know parenting is a collaborative task. We're not meant to parent in isolation. I really believe parenting is a sacred task. It's something that's really, really holy. And when you have these children, whether you give birth to them or you adopt them or foster them, God has entrusted them to you for a season. And what a privilege it is to be able to raise a child. And I really believe we are raising world changers. It's something that's in God's heart that I believe as followers of Christ that we can raise our children to impact society for good. There's a verse in Isaiah 54, verse 13, and it says, all your children shall be taught by the Lord, and great shall be the peace of your children. What a beautiful promise. I remember when my kids were younger saying, God, I don't know anything. I don't really know anything. I didn't grow up babysitting kids. I used to surf and run surf contests. You know, I wasn't a babysitter. And I was like, I don't even know how to do this thing. But then I saw this verse. And I remember praying, saying, God, while my children are sleeping, would you teach them? Would you teach them about your ways? Would you teach them when I can't teach them? And I really have seen that to be true because there's no manual, right? When you come home, there's no manual. And so, you know, I remember thinking about parenting when my kids were babies, and I thought, what I'm going to do is this. And I actually wrote about it in the book. I would watch other families ahead of me on the journey, and I used to have a journal, and I would literally write in the journal, make a note. When my kids are teenagers, do this. Don't do this. I like this thing. And I would learn from parents ahead of me what the good things they did, as well as the things that I thought, you know, that's not something I want to replicate. So I want to encourage you, look around you, learn from those around you, because parenting is a sacred task, but it's not something we're meant to do alone. I know that parenting nowadays feels harder than ever before. I don't know if you agree with me, but the world seems to be moving faster. The expectations are higher and the pressure on our children is so much more, yet it seems like the support sometimes is thinner. And so what I'm hoping to do tonight is to lend courage to you, to give you encouragement, to strengthen you, to motivate you, to see how you could parent on purpose. If we look at global trends, big picture trends, I'm always interested in that. We know that the world is changing as we speak, right? A couple of 100 years ago, it would take about 100 years for the world to change. You know, had the Renaissance, the Enlightenment. It would take many, many years. Then things started to change slow and slow, and about 50 years ago, they said, you know, the world was starting to change in 20 years, 5 years. But how many of you use ChatGPT nowadays? A few of you in the room, right? That wasn't around 3 years ago. And within a year, a lot of how we do life has started to change. And imagine with me for a moment, I'm looking around the room and I'm seeing different generations. So I'm Gen X. And my generation, I read the other day, is the last generation that can remember life without the internet. The internet, so my generation straddles both worlds. I can remember growing up without the internet, but I also am comfortable in using technology. My children from millennials and Gen Z onwards know life without, they can't imagine life without the internet. They're digital natives, right? Now, how many of you have got very young babies or toddlers or are pregnant? Your children are not going to know life without artificial intelligence. It's very sobering. You know, they're growing up in an environment where artificial intelligence it's just there. And so how do we parent with wisdom? And that's what I'm hoping to give to you today. Around the world, we see parents are burning out. We see mental health challenges in children in increasing measure. In South Africa, we know that poverty, unemployment, food scarcity, violence, limited access to education is what is wreaking havoc in our families, the fatherlessness. So all of these pressures compound, and it makes parenting a lot harder. I was chatting to a mom today, and we were saying, you know, there's so much information out there. It's almost like there's too much, so then you don't know what to look at, and then you almost don't look at anything. And so, you know, knowing that Focus on the Family is around to give you sound advice, I think is a very, very helpful thing. Because our children are watching how we live. Kids have great fakeometers. Don't you agree? They can see if you're not being real. And so they are watching the way we live, and they actually are counting on you saying and doing what you say you're going to do. And I think we mustn't settle for anything less. We mustn't say, okay, you know, I'm going to pretend to be one thing. You know, my kids must just deal with it. We need to be transparent. We need to be honest. We need to be vulnerable, and we need to be real. Obviously in age-appropriate ways. But I think sometimes we're settling for surviving and not thriving. If I look around me, I see so many people just saying, I'm just going to settle. I'm just going to make it. I just got to do it. I remember walking with this one couple, American couple actually, and they were having struggles with their young son, and they had a baby, and they were just surviving. They were just couldn't wrestle. They couldn't figure out some of the issues and the challenges their son was battling with, and their marriage was struggling. And then they started to get some counseling, and they started to get input, and they started to take care of themselves and find a way. And now, as I've watched them, I've started to see how they've started to thrive. And that thriving doesn't just happen. You know, if I want to run a marathon, and I don't just get up one day, yes, I might sign up in like a moment, but then I have to do the hard work. And then I have to actually show up on the day of the marathon and run it. But I don't just show up and run unless I'm like some superhero, which I'm not. But you actually have to do the hard work. And that's with parenting. You've got to do the hard work to make sure that your family can flourish. So I just want to check where we're all at today. How many of you feel like your child's attention is constantly being pulled in different directions by screens and devices? Okay, some of you. Great. Okay, it wasn't just me when my kids were younger. How many of you sometimes feel overwhelmed by parenting and what's going on around you? Yeah, so just look around the room. You're pretty much all in the same boat. We're all in this together. And tonight we're going to speak about how to get device-free zones in your home, because that's really important, like meal times. And you're going to also realize that you're not alone. And when we know we're not alone, it means we can take hands and do it together. We're not stuck. So tonight I'm going to speak about 5 skill domains to help you parent on purpose. They are heart awareness, boundaries and loving discipline, communication and problem solving, guidance and growth, parental self-care and support. So that's the framework of what I'm going to tell you tonight. And I hope that it will really, really set you on a trajectory. So heart awareness. That involves how you connect with your children. When you notice a mom or a dad bend down and talk to their toddler or their child when they're throwing a tantrum, when they see that their son comes home from school and he's really down, helping connect with him and figure out what's going on with him. Emotional connection actually builds resilience in your children's life much more than your intelligence or their intelligence or your income. I'm going to say it again. Emotional connection builds resilience much more than intelligence or income. And it's the foundation of all parenting, because connecting with your children is actually love in action. Emotional connection, and I have it up there, is the ability of the parent and the child to tune into one another's feelings, to respond with empathy, to create self-awareness, a sense of warmth and safety. It's, you know, the days have gone by where we just say, well, boys don't cry. You know, my father-in-law is 85, and when his wife passed away, he was so sad. And I said to him, Dad, it's okay to cry. And he's like, no, you know, men don't cry. And I said to him, no, it's not true. Men can cry. And I think we need to find ways to tune in to our children and to see what is going on and have those mirror neurons connecting with one another. And then emotional regulation is the skill of managing one's own emotions in a healthy way. It's staying calm and helping you and your children express emotions in appropriate ways. So for some of us, it might mean we need to pause before we react. It's very hard, right? I don't know about you, but sometimes I just want to get all in. And we have to learn how to pause. And so in summary, emotional connection is tuning in and regulation is calming down. That's a great life skill. I wish someone had taught me that when my kids were toddlers. Some of you might know much more than I did when my kids were young like that, but learning to understand how emotional intelligence affects your life is an important skill to have because we want our families to flourish emotionally. So what that means is you can learn to manage your emotions in a healthy way. You can help your children do the same. We want our families to flourish spiritually. That means we put healthy rhythms in place. We connect as a community. We want our families to flourish relationally because that's the foundation. Life is all around relationships, right? And so that causes us to focus and look outwards. Sorry, this feels very loud. Is it very loud for you guys? You're okay. Maybe it's just going back on me. So when we teach our family and our children how to thrive and we grow in an environment of thriving, it creates time for fun. It creates time for shared meals, for listening, and for connecting. We don't just go through our to-do list. In 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, there's a passage that says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind." You guys know this. And that is one of my favorite passages of all time. For God has not given us a spirit of fear. I think that this world is held captive by fear. For me personally, I believe it's an end-time strategy that the enemy is wielding across the world in different ways. And when we go into a place of fear, we hide. It actually comes from Genesis, when Adam and Eve were in the garden and Eve ate the fruit. And then it says that God was walking in the garden as he usually did. And then he said, "Adam, where are you?" And then Adam eventually says, "I hid because I was scared. I was afraid." And fear causes us to hide. So how does that show up in the way we parent? Well, it shows us, it shows up in the different ways that we put pressure on our kids. We want to maybe clear the way with bulldozer parenting, or we want to hover and helicopter. We want to protect them too much. It shows up in the way that we work, that we want to work so hard just to make sure our kids have what we didn't have, but then we're absent. And so fear causes us to do different things, which ultimately is not helpful for us because it's not from God. But he has given us a spirit of power, and that word is dunamis. I love it. It's that thinking that we putting our finger in an electric socket. We've got dynamic power. We have agency we can overcome. And then he's given us a spirit of love. And we know that secular research has shown that in our brains, when you distill all the emotions down to 2 different things, it's either fear or love. In our brains, you cannot be in fear, a place of fear, or a place of love at the same time. It's not possible. So when we are in a place of love, that means we respond differently. Our children feel safe, they feel seen, they feel heard. When your children feel safe and seen and heard and understood, cared for and appreciated, it enables them to risk, to try new things. Just picture your home for me for a moment when in that environment, and for yourself, if you feel safe and seen and heard and cared for and understood, you can take risks, you can try things. How much more so for your children? And so when we live in that place of love, and there's so many interesting ways that you can do it. I was sharing this morning at the resilience talk about how in our home, and again, for some of you, I know we're there this morning, so bear with me. But we have this thing that we developed in our home. When our son was 7, he was in an all-boys school. And we thought, how do we communicate love? That my son and my daughter would know that we love them. Because I don't know about you, but Matt, when he was 7, 8, 9, he didn't want to go around in front of all his friends and go, "Mommy, I love you, I love you." So we thought, well, let's do a double squeeze. So I want you to practically do it with me. If you're with a friend or a spouse, or if you're comfortable with the person next to you, I just want you to double squeeze their arm or their hand. And that's code word for "I love you." And so we would do that. He'd get out the car. Hey, Matt. Hey, Ems. You just double squeeze. You don't say anything. We've been doing it for years that even now, at 25 and 23, we sit around the table, we say grace, we double squeeze. When they come home, we just always do this. And still, it means, I love you. So you have to find creative ways to tell your children you love them, because when they know they're loved, it helps them grow in their identity. Because most of life's problems, face it, come down to identity or your lack of identity. And when your children know who they are, it helps them fully grow into who God intended for them to be. And so God has not given us fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Now, the word in the Greek word is sophronismo. Just say it with me, sophronismo. There we go. It's a great word to say. It's like kind of like fabulous. Sophronismo has the concept of full, clear thoughts, of the thinking something from the beginning of one thing to the end of the whole process. The ability of having sound mind, of clear thinking. See, fear stops us from thinking clearly. But God has given us the ability to have a sound mind. That means whatever your children are facing, whether they're going through a tough time or a good time, whatever you're facing, any challenges, God has given you the ability to think clearly, to be self-disciplined in your thought processes, and then to make wise choices. So we have to appropriate that in our lives as we parent our children. So whatever age and stage you go through with your kids, you can have a sound mind. And so that leads to emotional intelligence. You know, one day, let me just see where we are on our slides. Yeah. So emotional intelligence, I'm going to take you through this thing called Ruru. And I'll explain it, and then I'm going to break it down. One day I came home from the day, I'd been out for the day, and I started chopping carrots and potatoes, and I was making supper, and the dogs were around me, and I suddenly noticed I was really chopping those vegetables, guys. The carrots and the potatoes literally flew off the counter. I was really going for it. I shouted at my dogs, and at the time I was writing my first parenting book, and suddenly I thought, whoa, hang on, what's going on here? Why am I so aggressive with these vegetables? The inanimate objects, they did nothing. And then I remembered, oh, my husband and I had a disagreement. Do any of you have disagreements, or is it just me? Okay, great, thank you. So my husband and I had a disagreement that morning. It wasn't a big issue, but then I had to do the school run. He had meetings, and so we never had a chance to talk it through. I came home, and I wondered why I was so short with the kids, shouting at the dogs, hacking at the vegetables, and I realized it was that. So then I thought, Mandy, calm down. Took a few deep breaths, and I thought, what's going on? Okay, Neil and I had a disagreement. So I thought, okay, now I understand why I'm feeling like I'm feeling. What could I do about it? Now, I don't know about you, but if I have a disagreement with my husband, dinner is not very pleasant. So the evening kind of is almost ruined. So then I thought, no, I need to fix it. So I thought when Neil comes through the door, I could message him and say, hey, darling, we need to have a chat when you come in. So we'd go to the room and we'd sort it out. It wasn't a big issue, so it wasn't really anything major. I can't even remember what it was about. But we managed to sort it out, and the evening was rescued. My food seemed to taste nice. You know, they say if you if you put a bit of love in, it's the secret ingredient. Or if it's not love, then, you know, anyway, I'll just leave it there. But that's what I realized emotional intelligence is about, is the R stands for recognize the emotion. And so you have to name it to tame it. Slow down long enough to notice what is going on in your body. Help yourself. And the reason I'm saying about you is you have to first understand it for yourself before you can teach it to your children. So what is going on in your body, or what is going on in your child's body? What is happening in their behavior? You want to see beneath. So instead of saying you're being rude, you would say to your child, I can see you are frustrated. Now, my daughter could understand emotional intelligence very easily, but my son really struggled. So I would play these different games with him, and I was very aware of leading questions. So if I say to all of you, are you having a good time tonight? You see, it's a leading question. If you're not, you can't really say, no, sorry, mans, I'm not, actually. But so I was very aware I don't want to ask my child leading questions. So when Matt was upset, I would say to him, hey, Matt, are you happy or sad? And I would sometimes do the opposite emotion first, because then I'd see, you know, if it's a leading question, then he would say that. And through asking those questions, I would help him give different words for what he was feeling. Emily seemed to tune into understanding different emotions very quickly because there's a difference between jealous and angry, irate, frustrated, sad, depressed, lonely, happy, joyful, ecstatic. There's a wide spectrum. So if you want to figure out how to teach your children it and using technology wisely, a great tool is to take out your phone and say, give me an emoji for happy. Give me an emoji for very angry or irritable. And so they start to identify the faces, or you get them to draw it. But start to get your children to use different words for emotions, because when I did a parenting course in Khayelitsha a few years back, the one mom came to me. We were speaking around Ruru, and she said, yeah, when my child, and she learned about the emotions, she said, my child is angry. When my child is sad, it's angry. When my child is irritable, he's angry. When my child is uncertain or insecure, he's angry. They only knew angry. And so we had to help them have more words. So we need to understand why we're feeling what we're feeling, and you've got to look underneath. Because self-awareness is the start of transformation, right? So I understand the vegetables did nothing to me. I recognized my emotion. I was irritated, I was frustrated, I was angry. And then I understood why. You see, every emotion has a story. Emotions are just signposts. If I hold up a stop sign, you'll know that this is a stop sign. So emotions are wonderful followers, but terrible leaders. Think about it. You watch a really soppy movie and you're crying in the movie. Your emotions are like, oh, you just gutted, you know. But then you watch like a boxing, amping, pumping movie and you feel like you can conquer the world. See, emotions are fickle. You have a great cup of coffee and you can just go for it. So emotions are great followers, but terrible leaders. And they need to come under the truth of God's word. And we need to allow our children and ourselves to experience our emotions, but they need to be surrendered to the truth. And so when we understand why, what's going on, we can deal with it. So the question is to ask yourself, is my child hungry? Is my child overstimulated? Is my child needing a connection? Is my child feeling overwhelmed? What's underneath the emotion? What's going on? It takes a bit of work, but once you've got it, it actually comes very quickly. So understanding doesn't excuse poor behavior, but it often just explains it. You can understand what's really going on. You go, okay, now I get that. Now I know why that's happening. Now I know what I need to do. And so learning to regulate your response, which is the third R. So it's recognize, understand your emotion, and then regulate your response. That was when I had to take that deep breath. I had to pause. It's not suppressing. It's not pretending I'm not feeling the emotion, but it's actually helping me choose my response. So I'm not ruled by that emotion. It's okay, so I need to regulate. I need to calm myself down. I need to breathe. You can help your children find different ways for it, giving them words and action, a hug. In our family, we say hugs make everything better. We still say it because hugs sometimes do. You know, your child needs about 20 or so touches, or you also actually need more than 20 meaningful touches a day for emotional well-being. So when my son, Matt, he lives in Rondebosch now, when he comes home, I like grab him from behind and I give him about 20 kisses on his cheek. And he's like, oh, Mom. And I'm like, Matt, you need lots of hugs and touches and kisses and affection because I need to make sure you're getting enough of that, you know, because he's working, he's not dating, he's not married. So I need to make sure he gets appropriate, you know, hugs. And besides, I just love him. So, you know, but what I'm getting at is, you know, helping your children figure out what is it that they need and what do you need. And so when we move on to the third part is you use all that information wisely. So you turn that emotion into wisdom and you choose an appropriate response. Do you need a nap? Do you need a bubble bath? Does your child need a nap or a bubble bath? Do you need a cup of tea? Do you need to speak to someone? Do you need to pray about something? You know, you decide how to move forward. And then I think this is a really great thing afterwards. And again, it's a bit of work in the beginning, is you just use that information to regulate. So not regulate, you use it to apply wisdom. So what you do is say, okay, what could I do next time in that situation? So every emotional moment is a chance for you to connect with your child. And then we move on to consistent boundaries and loving discipline. You know, there we realize that boundaries are a great gift. You know, if we didn't have boundaries, the ocean would be all over the earth. We wouldn't have sunrise and sunset. And when I lived in Port Elizabeth, we would joke about having 4 seasons in one day. But in Stellenbosch, we literally have 4 seasons. And you go throughout the year and you see the vines growing, and then you see the buds blossoming, and then the harvest time, and then you see them pruning the vines, and then the vines are stalks, and you just literally see the four seasons. And we need those boundaries. We need them in our life for healthy living, because our children, when they know what to expect, they feel safe. And the thing with discipline and training and all of that is that our children are counting on us to provide appropriate boundaries for their lives. Children thrive when their limits are clear, when they're predictable, and they're enforced with kindness. We need more kindness in the world. Sometimes we can get very harsh and strong, and boundaries are simply love in action. It's a really, really wonderful way. The thing, though, with boundaries and with discipline is that we have to find a way to figure out, is my child being childlike or is my child being rebellious? So, for example, let's say I have a 4-year-old little girl and I give her a glass of milk. And I say, hey, sweetie, here's a glass of milk. And I literally give it to her in a glass. And I don't give her any other instruction. And so she's toddling around. The next minute she trips. And she falls, the glass smashes, the milk spills, and she starts screaming. How would you respond? Okay, another scenario. I give my daughter a glass of milk. And this time I say to her, hey, sweetheart, just sit down on the floor, sit on the step, and drink your milk. I turn my back, I'm busy with something else. The next minute I hear a crash, she trips, she falls, glass smashes, she starts screaming. There's two different heart responses there. The one, she's simply being a child. Children walk, they trip, they fall, they mess things. I didn't give an instruction. She was just being a child. The second response is she was being rebellious because I told her to sit down and I told her to drink it. And those require different discipline responses. You see, the root word for discipline is train, correct, and guide. According to Hebrews, it speaks about how God disciplines us as a father. It's a form of love. But that word means train, correct, and guide. It's not punishment. Punishment is a penalty for a past wrong. So I want to encourage you, please take the word punishment out of your vocabulary. Just take a rubber, erase it. That's not how we raise our kids. We discipline, we train, we correct, we guide. And so when we do that, we understand what our children need from us, because we can figure out, okay, I need to train my children in this. I need to correct them with my words, with consequences. I need to guide them into a better way. But the thing is, we need to understand the ages our children are at and what they're capable of, because sometimes we can expect too much or too little, and then we get frustrated or they get frustrated. I created this chart, the authority and influence chart. There we go. Now, this is something that I found has been really helpful. Just don't look at where it kind of crosses over. It was very hard for me to get it on, on numbers and in Keynote. But basically, when your child is born, your authority is really high. You don't say to your baby, oh, little one, may I feed you? Come, little one, I want to feed you. Would you like to be fed? What do? You just feed the baby, right? A baby has a dirty nappy, you change the nappy. Your authority is at an all-time high, and your influence over this baby is zero. You don't want to influence a baby, you just do. But you don't want to be in that position all the way as your children grow up. I believe a healthy goal is that your authority starts to decline. So depending, again, on your birth order, your child's needs, maturity, whatever's going on, every family is different. You know, what's going on. Around about 16, 17, 18, 19, you really want your authority to start to decrease and your influence to increase. And why I say that is that's the goal that you want, because I don't want my 25-year-old son listening to us because he's afraid of us. I want him to come to us for advice and input and take our counsel because of the influence and the relationship and the connection we have. So this is a great long-term goal, because then at the different ages and stages, I can start to reduce my authority and I can increase my influence. It's kind of like parenting in a funnel, where your boundaries are very tight early on and you start to release it, and it works on trust. Now, again, it's 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. It's just this you kind of get the idea of how it crosses over. And this for me was a very helpful long-term picture, because you're raising someone else's husband, someone else's wife, you're raising someone else's mother, you're raising someone else's father. So think about your children in your home right now. What kind of man and woman do you want to release one day? Do you want them to be kind? Do you want them to be generous? Do you want them to follow Jesus? Well, then you parent backwards. Do you think, this is who I want to release? Now, I'm thinking ahead to when my son or my daughter's 18, 19, 20, 21. Now, I'm looking backwards. What do I need to do right now to lay the foundation for them to become that person? And you speak life over your children. My son, we used to have a cat. Her name was Flossie. She was actually Emily's cat when Emily turned 5. But you know how cats choose people? So Flossie chose Matt. And then Emily was so frustrated that she gave Flossie to Matt, and she was upset about it for her whole life. But Matt, who was also interestingly allergic to cats, but loved Flossie, Flossie would sleep on him. But you know what he would do? Is he would hold her over his shoulder like a baby. And he'd walk around the house like this. Well, this is like my 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old. Flossie only died like 2 years ago. He'd walk like this and he'd do this. Now, Matt's never babysat. We don't have lots of kids like babies around us, but kids love him. And I would look at him and go, Matthew, you are going to be the most incredible father one day. And his chest would swell up. I'm like, my boy, the way you hold Flossie, the way you look after your cat, I can just see the kind of dad you're going to be. You're going to walk with your baby and rock your child. And his chest would just swell up. You see, I'm casting vision. We have to parent with vision. Because if we don't, we're just going to get lost in a sea of influences from the world around us. So we have to be intentional. Think about your children right now. What's the 1 or 2 traits that you already see in them that you can call out? What is the 1 or 2 traits that you want to develop in their lives? And we understand that with parenting, it's not easy, but we have to be intentional. So when your child is born, if we go through the ages and stages, when your child is from 0 to 1, again, guys, I'm really generalizing, okay? You really have to these are just broad ages. Again, you have to just take a bunch of other factors into account, but you're just a nurturer. Your child is learning to trust you. You're building rhythms, boundaries, in terms of how you feed, the schedules. You're just nurturing your child. And then from about 1 to 5, your role is that of a commander-in-chief. I say, and you do. I say when you're going to eat, when you're going to sleep, what you're going to do. At this stage, you want your children to learn to obey you because you want them to be able to one day hear God's voice and obey God's voice and have a healthy understanding of what authority is like in their lives. How many adults do you know battle with authority? A lot of adults. And if we can train our children between the ages of 1 to 5 to understand and respond to authority in a healthy way, you're setting them up to succeed in life. So a little tip that I learned many years back, and I've taught this in quite a few countries around the world, is this one that I don't really have a word for it, but it's kind of like a yes, mom, yes, dad. So the trick with this one, especially between the ages of 1 to 5, is you want to get your children's attention. I mean, okay, just even for this is a marriage tip. For wives, get your husband's attention. Say, hey, darling, look at me. But for children, you want to get their attention because they could be playing on the ground, they're drawing, whatever, and you say to your child, hey, Tom, come, it's supper time, and Tom doesn't listen to you. Tom's busy playing, and Tom hasn't even heard you because he's so engrossed in whatever he's doing. Eventually, you're shouting at him because he hasn't got up to come to the supper table. Meanwhile, the little tip that can help you because your children want to obey you is you say, hey, Tom, look at me. Look at me. So all of you, look at me. See your eyes on me. Another mom said that didn't work for her, so she said to her son, hey, lend me your ears, and he'd come up to her like this. Whatever works for your children, get their attention, get them to look up and look at you. So, hey, look at me. Tom, look at me. Finish up with your game in 1 minute or however you want to word it. Finish up, pack your things together, come to the table, we're going to eat. Now, this is the crux, is you want them to say, yes, mom, or yes, dad, or mama, papa, whatever they call you. You want them to acknowledge that they've heard you. That little thing where they say, yes, mom, there's something I think that happens within them that they want to please their parent naturally. So when they get up, you go, oh, my sweetheart, thank you for listening to me. You're amazing. And you celebrate it. But you don't do that to that degree every time. But you're trying to get them to respond in that way. So getting them to say, yes, mom. I was doing a parenting course in Jordan in the Middle East with Syrian refugees. And these women, I was sharing this with them. And this one mom had a little 2-year-old, 3-year-old, a young child. And this child was running wild in the room and just causing havoc. And it was so hot. And we were in this room because the women were not allowed to be outside. And, They took off all their extra clothing. So it was just us women inside, but the windows were closed. It was so hot. So they had a fan going full steam ahead. And this child went up and was wanting to touch it. And normally they would grab the child and hit the child over the head. But now I was trying to teach them for real. And one of the children actually developed some challenges because of that. And so I was trying to teach them, you can't just hit your child over the head. You need to do this. And in Arabic, she tried this, and it worked. The whole room looked, and they were like, oh. I'm like, yeah, I see. Because getting your children to say yes, mom, or yes, dad, or acknowledge or obey you is also for their safety. You want to protect their lives, right? If you're going to cross the street and cars are coming, and you say to your son, hey, Matt, hold my hand. Come now, hold my hand, walk with me. You want to know your child will obey you because it will save their life. If they don't listen to you and run across the street, they could get hit by a car. So it's for their own good as well. Commander-in-Chief, in the 1 to 5, you're teaching them boundaries with kindness. You're teaching them how to make choices. We were at a restaurant today, lovely restaurant, but there were so many choices. I didn't know what to choose. I wanted everything. And it took me a long time to make a choice. Whereas some of the restaurants in Staley's I go to, there's a restaurant called Feed. 4 starters, 4 mains, 4 desserts. You know how long it took me to pick what I wanted? 10 seconds. It's the same with your children. It's, this decision paralysis when there's too many choices. You teach them to say, do you want to wear your yellow shirt or your blue shirt? Do you want to play with a soccer ball or read a book? I'm not saying with everything you need to give choices, but that's the stage you're teaching them to make choices. And then the key thing is to honor their choices. We don't override it. We want to build a culture of honor and respect. So, for example, let's say with your child, you go to a restaurant and you say to them, do you want a burger or do you want a toasted sandwich? And they choose a burger. So what do? We lean over and we start cutting up the burger, right? And then your child starts crying. Has that happened to any of you? Yeah. You see, there's this thing around building honor and respect in a family. So if your child has chosen a burger, you say to them, sweetie, can I cut up your burger for you? It's not such a big deal if they say no and they mess everywhere. They'll learn. But the thing is, you're teaching them that what's theirs is theirs and you're showing honor and respect. And it can work both ways. You're building in a foundation that helps set them up for life. And then you go into the teacher-trainer role, 6 to 12 years. And that's where you're teaching them the why behind things. You're teaching them skills. I used to have a journal, and I would teach my children how to be a friend, how to navigate things. And one time I was teaching them how to hear God's voice. And so I remember setting up an obstacle course because I'd read about this before, and I played some loud music, and I told Matt, shout while I'm talking to Emily. And I said, Emily, we're going to put a blindfold, and I want you to get from there, and when you get there, I'm going to give you a chocolate. Sometimes bribery does work, okay? But so and then I'd go, okay, Ems, I'm talking very quietly now. I want you to go around the corner. I want you to climb over this. All the while there's music in the background, Matt's teasing her and shouting and giggling and distractions. And she did it. And what I was trying to do was trying to teach her to focus, but also how to hear God's voice. Because we're going to have distractions in life. And so you find practical ways to teach your children. I set tables, like a 5-course meal, and taught them how things work. You teach them all sorts of things, the why behind things. It's a really, really wonderful stage. And then you move into a coaching role, 13 to 18. Oh, that was so wonderful. But there, your children need to experience more consequences. I mean, all through the ages, there's age-appropriate consequences. And I know I'm just touching lightly on this, but remember, we're speaking about boundaries and loving discipline. In all of these stages, we have some boundaries and loving discipline. And so with certain consequences of how they navigate things, one time, again, I know I'm sharing a lot of my stories, but a lot of what I'm sharing does come from personal experience. My son was in junior school in grade 6 or 7, and he left his phys ed kit behind, and they were swimming that day. But he was in an all-boys school. Mom, we've got swimming after break. Please, can you bring my swimming kit? And my husband and I had been talking through some parenting things, and I thought, sorry, sweetie, I can't come. He's like, what am I going to do, Mom? I'm like, I don't know. You figure it out. I can't get to school. I've got other things on. It was very hard for me to do that. You know what he had to do? He had to swim in his undies. But do you think he ever forgot his phys ed kit at home for the rest of his school career? Not a chance. You see, they need to experience certain consequences at certain ages. And then we move into mentorship, 18 plus. And that's when we give wisdom and we we give them life influence, through the relationship that we've built on the foundation of all the stages. But now some of you might have older kids here. And you might think, well, I've messed up. Well, the mercies of the Lord are new every morning. There's grace, there's forgiveness. One mom said to me, I have messed up so badly. Again, another mom in Khayelitsha, and she just said, I have no relationship with my daughter. I think the daughter was about 17 at the time. And I said to her, well, forgiveness and repentance is a wonderful thing. That can repair many a relationship. And she came the next week and she said she reached out to her daughter and asked her forgiveness for some things and started to work towards building relationship. See, every day the mercies of the Lord is new and he gives us a do-over every single day. So if you've messed up with your kids, you can repent, you can apologize, you can make things right, and you can try again. And that's so important. But one of the things that I realized is we have to adapt as we parent our children through the different ages. Our children don't have to adapt. And that dawned on me the one day I was cooking supper and Emily was 14 years old, and I wanted to treat her like a 6, 7-year-old. And suddenly I realized, oh, Mandi, you have to grow up and change. We have to adapt in the way that we treat our children. Because if I treat my teenager like I'm a commander-in-chief, what will that produce in them? What do you think? Rebellion. And that's what happened to me. My dad treated me like a 5, 6-year-old, and I rebelled so badly. I only started following Jesus at 17, but I think a lot of my rebellion, with other reasons too, but was because of that. And if we treat a 4, 5-year-old like a teenager and we give them too much freedom, it produces an indulged child, and that's not something that we want. We really want to take into account the different ages and stages and adapt how we parent. Now, I don't have a timer up, so I have no clue how I am. Okay, so are you guys 5 more minutes? Then we're going to have a break? Okay, let me just finish my point. So one of the things around parenting through the ages and stages is consistency. I don't know about you, but if you could take 2 parents, one battles to be more consistent than the other parent, right? And consistency is hard. But one of the things that our children are counting on us is to say and do what we say we're going to do. They need us to be consistent. They need us to follow through. So if you say to your child, I'm not going to bring your phys ed kit to school, and the next day they forget it, what do you have to do? You have to say, sorry, I'm not going to bring it, because they really need that. It produces stability in our home. In Proverbs 20, verse 11, it says, children are known by the way they act, whether their conduct is pure and whether it is right. And through discipline and healthy boundaries, we can keep that true north, that focus of saying, this is the direction we're headed. I'm being intentional, knowing that I'm raising a child who is going to change the world around them, because I'm releasing someone with intentionality as we get through the ages and stages together.